Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Keys to ESP. Once again, this is your one of your Team ESP members, John. I am once again joined with the rest of Team ESP here. We have the Untamer Benson.
Hi.
We have the Archon trader, Dennis. And the deck opener, Josh. Hello, guys.
Hello.
How are you guys doing today?
Great.
Pretty good. Looking for my first deck ever because I forgot it.
Nice.
I am doing dandy. Fine and dandy.
Awesome. So it's been another week or so since we last talked. And this week we're going to, it's titled "The Race Is On." This awesome title. Thank you to Benson, our untamer here, with his love of rush decks, decided to give us this name for this week's episode. And we're going to be discussing about CotA. And that's our main topic of discussion. Of course, we're going to check in with each of the guys before we get into the main topic. And then, of course, we will go over some Keyforge combos that we've recently seen as well. And that'll be our episode this week. So, without further ado, let's check in with the guys. How have you guys been doing? Any recent Keyforge news or happenings with each of you guys at all? Let's start with Josh here.
Hey, yeah. So as far as actually playing, honestly speaking, I haven't really played recently, but I am following. Well, I did previously follow a deck that I sold that was entered into the Swedish unofficial store championships. So I've recorded the games. I've commentated on all the games. I was just really curious to see how Nick would pilot the deck and how it would fare against all four sets. It was a CotA, Shadows Dis, and Untamed deck. So that's the main thing that I've been doing, just editing videos for you guys to watch and just chilling out.
Awesome. So far, has that tournament concluded at this time, or is it still kind of ongoing?
Yeah, it's actually already concluded. I have the first 3 episodes already up. So the first 3 games already up. Every game was super exciting. The 4th game should be up by the end of the week as well. So, if you guys are very interested in kind of like live gameplay or TCO gameplay, check it out.
Cool. So how'd that deck fare anyways? Did it take it, or where'd it place?
It placed a solid 2-2, if I'm not mistaken. It won twice, lost twice, so it didn't actually make it to the top, to the final round.
Okay.
But every time it won, it crushed. It's just I think it just fell down to matchup and slight misplays here and there, but it was all very, very, very fun.
Awesome. Yeah, for sure. Go so go and check it out on Josh's YouTube channel over there. On J Dobby, right?
Yeah,
Joe Dobby.
yeah, it's Joe Dobby, JODOBBI and then KF.
Awesome. How about you, Benson? Any Keyforge news on your end?
Well, Dennis and I had our reps on Wednesday, but otherwise, that was the only Keyforge that was happening. I did open 2 new decks and been making those videos there. So, yeah, unfortunately, nothing too exciting from those posts except for a nice Tachyon Pulse in Saurians. That was fun.
What's Tech Impulse?
Oh, Tachyon Pulse is a Star Alliance action card. I believe there's an Ember Pip. And
so you pulled out a Maverick.
a Maverick Tachyon Pulse
Nice.
in Saurians, yeah. You play it, you destroy all artifacts, and exhaust or stun all the creatures with upgrades on them. Something like that. Yeah.
Okay. Cool.
Yeah, no, maybe Dennis will remember more about what happened on Wednesday.
Don't really remember. I also recorded it. I couldn't take off the video off the iPhone, so I'm not really sure how to do that. It's kind of like, it's pretty difficult. Anyway, new stuff for Keyforge for me is I sent out a bunch of decks because I was like really behind in sending. Sorry about that, guys. For whoever's listening, sorry about that. But yeah, so while I was organizing my mass mutation, I guess, decks, I found a display that I thought I all opened. I found a random display that's not opened. So I opened that on my own, and then I think I found a good deck that's gonna be probably part of a triad lineup. Just saying.
Wow.
So I don't know.
Oh, interesting. Cool.
Like finding
Well,
cash in your
while
pocket.
yeah. Well, while you guys are all opening decks and having fun, I actually tried to go out to our local store looking for some decks to buy. Unfortunately, there's no stock in this area right now, which is quite unfortunate. I mean, we probably know who to blame for this, but just letting you guys know, it's apparently a little more difficult to find stock right now in the GTA, which is which is surprising, because generally if we're looking for stuff, we can usually find it pretty easily, but that's at least in the last week. So unfortunately, no new Keyforge stuff for me, but I'm looking around for stuff. Alrighty, so with the episode name title, well, the race is on. We're hoping to discuss a little bit into Keyforge and the origins of each of our experiences. And we're going over the next couple episodes, we're going to be discussing going into each different set and having a little discussion in terms of our thoughts and our approaches to each set, and different, just using those as a discussion topic. So, following the storyline or history line of Keyforge, the first set that was released was Call of the Archons, the Red Box. And that's what really started everything off for us, or at least for three of us. I believe, Josh, you came in the second set?
Yeah, during Age of Ascension, yes.
Okay. But you do have experience with CotA, though, I'm guessing, right?
A lot of experience, yeah.
Okay. Yeah, for sure. So I just want to go around and see, how did you guys get into it, into the game? We did briefly discuss it before, but just as a touch base, for me at least, I started actually on the release day event. That was on a November, actually. I guess almost 2 years now. Where since 2 years prior release day event, and I was able to actually learn a little bit about this game, hear about it from my board game side of things. And it was originally released or not released, but they had like a testing distribution at Gen Con that year, and then release in November. So I was able to go to the release event, pick up a deck. I actually have it with me right here. My deck is called the Moon of Sunshire, and was able to learn the game and play with I believe it was like 12 to 16 people that first day. And it was a pretty interesting experience, and that got me into it. How about you guys? What were your first experiences, just touching base? I know we briefly discussed it. Let's go with Dennis.
Yeah. So we did discuss it on our second episode, I believe. Maybe a little bit first. Once again, just to recap, John over here actually was the one who introduced me. We took a snowboarding trip to one of the snowboarding spots here in Canada. It's called Blue Mountain. We stayed there for the weekend, and one of our down days, or I think after we went snowboarding, he says, "Dennis, take this deck. We're gonna teach you how to play." And like I said, I had no idea how to play any card games. Like I watched Yu-Gi-Oh, I watched Pokemon. I knew cards. I didn't know card games at all. I had absolutely no idea what I was doing. Like I had no idea. Not gonna lie. And then so we played over the weekend. I think one won one game, but we kind of did like a tournament style. There
Yeah,
were six of us.
I think I brought up a display or something and was like selling decks to you guys.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, pretty much.
Yeah,
That's what happened.
He brought a display, the first print, I think. It was one of those stand-up boxes. If you guys remember, it's probably so hard to find those now. But yeah, day or two after that trip, I literally looked it up on YouTube. First, like one of the things I really liked about it is like I enjoyed the game so much that I like I wasn't invested into anything, so I made my own somewhat like deck case. So I used like a hard cardboard to like make one of those to protect my deck, and I was like, that's how I got into it. So
Wow.
I was like, those little things are like what started for me, and then here we are now.
Nice. How about you, Benson? I think you were also in that same boat, right? Or at least
Kind of
sometimes around
close
that same
enough.
time.
Yeah, close
Yeah.
enough. The very first time, in truth, is I remember I was sitting right next to where John is sitting right now, to his left. I was given a deck that had an orange Archon. Unfortunately, that deck has probably been passed on to newer players as it wasn't strong. That was my first introduction. Again, like John was the only one that had any knowledge of how to play, what to do. So we were just following along and figuring out what this game's all about. Given my only experiences were with Pokemon, Yu-Gi-Oh, and those trading card games. That was where I came from. So you kind of played a lot with the battle line and things like that, trying to deal damage or whatnot. And then this game was very different in that, like in the title says, this set it's a race. It's a game about getting to that finish line, getting to the 3 keys, not about just beating down your opponent's creatures and whatnot. So that was my first introduction. But I was also there at that ski trip, and what I'll officially deem as my quote unquote first deck, because it was a deck that I took with me for a while to play with and get to know, had several features that were pretty unique. Right now it's not competitive anymore, but at the time it was definitely doing fairly well. So the tools, if I just quickly go through some special aspects of it, in Untamed it had 3 ancient bears with the bear flute. So for those of you that don't know what that card does, the bear flute was an artifact where you would use it as an action to fully heal an ancient bear, but if there aren't any bears in play, then you would search your deck and discard pile to put each ancient bear from them into your hand, and if you do, then shuffle your discard pile into your deck. So essentially, I could bring out 3 creatures out of nowhere in my Untamed set. And they were big ones with Assault, and the bears are 5 power with Assault 2, so that was the board control back then, right? Another cool part of the deck was the Fagin Urchin combo. Urchins are 1 power elusive creatures that when you play, you steal 1. Fagin was a 3 power elusive creature where when you reaped, you could return an urchin from play to your or from your discard pile to your hand. So you could repetitively steal from people using your urchins. So like a great combo from back in the day. I took it to a few events in the locals. Didn't do very well overall, but it definitely put up a fight. So it kept me motivated to try to get better at the game to win with this deck specifically. Before I ended up spending way more than I anticipated on this game, on buying a bunch of new decks and trying to really find the style of deck that I wanted to play that was also competitive for the existing meta. So yeah, that was my experience.
Cool. Josh, how about you? I know you came in a little bit later than this, right?
Yes, sir. During Age of Ascension.
Yeah, but so how did you get into it, into Keyforge?
Yeah, long story short, I had a buddy of mine who has like a whole library of card games. Well, not card games, but board games. Kind of like you, John, plays a lot of card games as well. And one day we were just chilling, kind of ran out of board games to play. We just wanted to hang out. And he thought that was the perfect time to teach Keyforge. And luckily, me and my girlfriend were open to learn it because it happened to be one of the most fun experiences I've had. So to this day, a year and a half later, out here playing Keyforge and having a good old time.
So even though your first, for Josh, your first game was was it an Age of Ascension deck? You said.
Yes.
So when did you get introduced into CotA then?
I got introduced to CotA preparing for the Grand Championships, which was literally like I think only like 4 or 5 months into actually playing the game. because my friend had told me, like, for the Grand Championships, you're going to be facing a lot of set one decks because those are the established decks, the easy to play ones that are relatively strong, well, very strong actually, I ended up finding out. So I started using some of my AOA decks against CotA decks and facing them and learning about little intricacies and mechanics that were found in CotA. And one of the most intimidating ones were rush decks and amber control decks. So those were the two main intimidating ones. But yeah, it's been fun. And post Grand Championships, which was September of last year, I started picking up my own CotA decks to play and to really get a grasp on the on the set there.
Oh, interesting. All right, so we should be able to get a pretty good um, analysis from your end, where you came from the second set coming back in, whereas we all started kind of with the first set. So that'll be interesting.
Yeah. You'll actually get an analysis that's probably contrary to popular belief that AOA is significantly inferior to CotA. In my opinion, it's not significantly inferior, but it is admittedly inferior. Just not as bad as people say it is.
All right. Well, tune in next week for
Yes,
for the
sir.
AOA analysis. But for this episode, we'll stick to Call the Archons for a bit. Awesome. So also from our previous discussions, we did say that a lot of our favorite houses was Shadows related, just because of what it can do. Kind of a two-pronged method where it reduces the opponent's amber, but also giving yourself an up towards for the game. So just with CotA, I was I wanted to ask the guys to see what is the best house, or at least if it is Shadows as established, well, probably what's maybe your favorite house? Is it the same or is it a little different? Right. We know Shadows in the first set, there was a lot of discussion. Shadows was probably the most powerful house. At the same time, I believe some FFG organizers and even developers did note that Shadows did kind of run all over the board in that set, and actually they're trying to really hard to design ways to taper back Shadows in future sets as well. So was there anything specific Shadows, or is it just Shadows all the way, or do you have another house that kind of stands out to you guys for this set? While the guys think, I'm just gonna express my opinions. Shadows is fun, but I'm love Dis. Dis was so much fun. For me, my first deck was Dis, Sanctum, and Mars. And for me, that was my first invite into this game, first experience, first foray. And my deck had double Ember Imps, which was amazing because it was just annoying. And then Mars, with its weird kind of mechanism where it didn't want to play with anybody else but itself, I thought was hilarious. And just the science fiction theme in there was really hard was really strong. And so for me, I felt like Dis was great. And that was probably my second favorite house, and then probably following up would be Sanctum, just because of the big bodies. For myself, Shadows is good, but I tried to stay away from it just because it was the popular opinion, and I try very hard to stay away from popular opinion if I can. How about you guys? What was it? Was Shadows like your end all be all, or was there something else?
I could start, and I just wanted to point out that Shadows has been my end all be all, just from AOA all the way to mass mutation. I love the way it's grown as well, from something that is just significantly known for steal to something that can also disrupt an opponent's hand or bounce effects, bouncing cards or creatures back to your hand. I love how it's been a little mix of everything. My favorite CotA deck actually is the Diamond Griffin. It has Dis, Sanctum, and Shadows, which actually segues into the fact that I totally agree with you, John. I love Dis. I love Control the Weak. I love Restoring Guntis. I love the Keyhammer, Lash of Broken Dreams combination. even Overlord Grecking, because as I mentioned in the previous podcasts episode, I'm really into controlling the board and controlling everything.
Mhm.
So this deck has double control of the week, Overlord Grecking, triple charrette, a lot of cards that will control both your opponent's decision making and the amber. It also has a mechanic in Shadows that I loved from CotA, which is why I was really adamant on getting this deck. It is Fagin Urchin. So I love the Fagin Urchin combination. That mechanic to me, I think, is so cool. I'm totally into the roguish assassin-like archetypes because I have an MMO background and I've only always played assassins and thieves. So yeah.
Nice. Yeah, actually, you do bring up in terms of dis and whatnot. There's a lot of Coda based cards that didn't get reprinted. I believe Control the Weak and Restrigantes. I believe those were only first set, right?
Yeah, they're totally unique to the first set. They've shown up in other ways, in Mass Mutation, for example. But you know what? Like those cards in CotA were just all reward and no kind of drawback, which is why I think they were taken out of the rotation.
Mm-hmm. Well, actually, I stand corrected. Actually, Restrigantes was also in the second set as well. So, but
Yeah, you're right. Actually, correct.
yeah. But I've seen most of the time, I believe Restrigantes and Control the Weak were the big combo to lock people out. So where Control the Weak is only a coded card. So
Yeah, a lot of ruling questions actually brought up between those two cards interactions early on into the game.
Mhm.
So
Mhm.
yeah.
Yep. How about you, Benson? What are your thoughts on Coda?
So best house, I would agree Shadows still deserves the crown. But obviously my favorite, as you introduced me as such, is Untamed. So looking at the two, and I just pulled up a few photos that I saved for all the cards in that set. I was just briefly reviewing this essentially the strengths of those houses, and it all revolves around how the meta sat at the time for CotA. Like these days, it's a bit different, but back then, since it was all about the amber pools, that's why Shadow sat on top. It had all the amber control and the best form of it, which is stealing rather than capture. So comparing to Sanctum, because back then there wasn't a way to really move that amber from a creature to your pool. It was just it sat there until the creature was gone, and then the amber would go back. So with stealing, you're taking their amber from them and you're keeping it for yourself. And that net gain is just that much better, which made Shadows deservedly the best house in CotA. Other tools that it had. So aside from that, the creature control was a bit below average, I would say. So it had several removal tools, but no really big wipe per se.
I mean, for big wipes, it was mainly with gateway
Poison Wave. Oh yeah. No, but within Shadows itself, right?
Oh, within Shadows.
Yeah,
Okay.
within Shadows, it was a lot of like certain creature with skirmish or poison. Poison was probably the main strength of Shadows creatures, with like Moon Cursor and things like that,
It
right?
was only two, wasn't it? It was just Moon Cursor and the Masses Asp.
Masses up, yeah. But we didn't really see poison in any other creature.
Yeah.
Maybe one in Untamed, but yeah, like that was
Oh, Ink
so
of the Spider.
Ink of the Spider, yeah.
Yeah.
But other than that, like you didn't really see the term poison in any other house, to my memory.
No, yeah, first set I don't think so.
Yeah. It had some solid artifacts too, like Subtle Maul, messing with people that way. But yeah, like Shadow sat as the king because of that. Though Untamed, as we've discovered since, because of the Rush archetype decks, that actually was more likely, or from what I've seen in tournament settings, in terms of who ended up winning it, it was the Rush deck archetype that won. Now, the caveat is that what style of rush? There is the pure amber generation and key cheating your way to victory that Untamed is known for. And then there's the amber control version of, okay, if your opponent has been generating, then you just steal and ramp up your amber with their amber. Then that's what Shadows does, right? So the combination of the two was probably some of the best decks out there, and the third supportive house would probably be between Logos and Dis. So we've all heard that like that triple threat house within each set. So for CotA, it was Logos, Shadows, and Dis. Mainly Logos to help you cycle, Dis to disrupt, as well as do a bit of amber control, and Shadows is the king of amber control. So you would have a higher chance of winning if you had that set of houses. Just from like what we've seen in play. Now, that's of course within the CotA meta. And Untamed was probably sitting at the 4th spot when everybody was thinking, oh, amber control, amber control. Amber control is like the most important thing. And then we see some tournaments where it's like, okay, you have the Untamed set with that combo. So whether you have a full moon or more ideally would be a hunting witch set, 1 or 2, and like a bunch of dust pixies with nature's call, a chota for key cheating. Like that combo was the staple in a rush deck in CotA, right? So I think that gave the other type, which is Logos, Shadows, and Dis, a run for its money. In that, well, if you can key cheat your way to victory, there's nothing the opponent can do. Key cost control was something that was very limited in CotA. So I think Lash of Broken Dreams and Dis was one of the primary ways to increase key cost for your opponent.
And then Jammer Pack from Mars, which is amazing.
Yeah, Jammer Pack with Grabber Jammer and things like that, right? So you needed those creatures and that artifact on the board to be able to use it to increase the cost and time it right. So anybody playing this rush deck would be paying an exorbitant amount of amber to forge. But aside from that key cost counter, if you can key cheat, you can spend all the amber you just gained, and there's not much to steal for Shadows. So that would be your out, right? And like we back then, I remember we were all talking about that OTK deck, which Mars I would say is also one of the strong houses, and now it's gonna like kind of spread the subject is like best 3 became best 4 became best 5. But Mars with the right setup of cards became a really good support. So the OTK decks that we've seen, one either had the Untamed set with the Chota Hazri Nature's Call build, or we had the Battlefleet Key Abduction set in Mars. So the difference being if you had all the draw capability in that deck, that Mars set would potentially be better because you don't rely on amber per se, but you rely on cards in your hand, and you can get a free key out of it. So for viewers that are listeners that don't know what those cards are, Key Abduction is the key cheat that was in Mars. It gave you an amber pip, and you would bring back all your Mars creatures back to hand, and then forge a key at +9 cost. Which, like, when I first saw that card, I was like,
well, but then you reduce it.
Yeah,
but then you reduce.
You reduce for each card in your hand.
Exactly.
Yeah. Sorry, I left that part out. So
potentially, if you had a big Mars board, you bring them all back, or initially you get them to reap whatever you need to do, and then bring them all back, and then fill up your hand, and then you could potentially forge for even less than 6 if you had enough cards.
Exactly. And there was that one deck that had multiple copies of Key Abduction. So if you ended up drawing through your deck, you have them all in your hand. If you had the deck with 3 copies, you could play them in succession and just win the game right there. So those type of OTK one turn kill, like those super decks that were in the pile at the time, that's what people were kind of seeking after. Other pieces, so pulling in a Logos card is like Time Traveler with library access. And we should mention later on is the
so there's a lot of broken combos that can come up.
Exactly.
But I'm just gonna hold it right there because I actually want to know what Dennis wants to. What's Dennis's houses or favorite house? I mean, I think I already know, but I just want him to speak for himself in terms of what he thinks about is the best house in CotA. So Dennis, want to share your thoughts real quick?
Yeah, you guys probably already know. It's always been shadows every set. So definitely CotA shadows to me is the best. It's the best house on its own in the last 4 sets. All of the sets and all of the different houses in each set, I think CotA shadows is still the best. With that being said, Benson did cover a lot of meta or slash a lot of combos slash a lot of things that can happen in CotA. What he didn't mention, what I noticed that everybody else didn't mention is that the CotA meta itself, as we mentioned, it is rush, but you can win with no board. You don't need a board in CotA. If you can burst either in shadows, which is a big steal, either you steal all their opponent's amber, or you can burst with untamed, with like all untamed in your either archives or in your hand. You can literally, like as Benson said, OTK. So in CotA, the first set,
So what's OTK for some of the listeners?
it's most commonly known as one turn kill or like one turn.
Yeah,
Is
one
it
turn kill. Yeah,
one turn kill.
yeah.
So what it is like a set of cards that can forge either 2 keys or 3 keys at once. At one time, I did have an OTK deck. Okay, the most common OTK set was the lands deck, which is your library access and defense seed deck. Pre-Errata, library access, you play a card, you draw a card. And then if you have the artifact Untamed, an artifact from Untamed called defense seed, bring back any card. So you bring back library access and you draw your whole deck. You pretty much have your whole deck in your hand. You play a key cheat. That's it. And then they have to errata that because of how strong it is. So the point is, CotA can hit you in many different ways, but it's essentially just build up your pool. You don't really need a board. Also, I wanted to mention that board-based decks in CotA aren't, I would say they're not as famous / they're not as good compared, like if you're just talking about the CotA meta. Like the first set meta, you don't really need a board to win. The game has progressed since then, and we're probably going to cover that later. But I've had a lot of decks that I don't need a board to win, just by isolation in CotA itself.
Yeah, not having a board, like not having to put down creatures or even just minimal number of creatures on the board to reap, to fight, or etc. It's more of just like kind of throwing cards down to generate the amber required kind of thing, right?
Yeah, my interpretation of not needing a board is like actually using the creatures for CotA, because a lot of the Untamed rush is actually coming from your creatures. The Hunting Witches, the Dust Pixies, the Nature's Calls, right? The Chota Hazri, the Key Cheat. So yeah, it's I think to make it clear for some of our listeners, no board really probably means not using them at all. Like not using the creatures, just putting them down to generate amber.
Yeah.
Also, I wanted to mention the fact that CotA had a lot of passive effects. Like just Josh said, you don't need to use it to affect the game. Like let's say Hunting Witch, you just put it down and you put down another creature. Passive effect. Mother, when you put it down, it increases the size of your hand. What else? Succubus, you play it down, their opponent has one less card in their hand. So a lot of passive effects. That was the CotA meta. Honestly, it was very, I would say, cut and dry. I wouldn't say simple. There are a lot of intricate stuff in it, but it was the simplest set out of the 4 so far for sure.
Yeah, I think it's more simple as in like straightforward, where it became very one-dimensional to a certain extent. If you went to a tournament where it was Archon and everyone brought their own decks and not a sealed environment, you just pretty much saw everyone going with the same or similar type of deck. I mean, thank goodness Keyforge is a unique card game, so not every single deck is the same, but it would end up becoming very similar, where you always would see an Untamed or shadows. And if you did see those houses, you can expect specific cards to be in those sets, right? Either a library access in a logos house, or some sort of key cheat, either key charge or chota in a Untamed, or bait and switch, which was a big one in shadows, right? So I think in terms of, thanks props to FFG for actually pushing out those erratas when they came out for bait and switch, library access, and a few cards that did cause kind of like a broken game to a certain extent. But I mean, it did come out, I believe the errata came out once, like towards the end of the first set or even into the second set being released before those big changes actually did come out. So it did provide some time for a lot of people to exploit those or not exploit, but I guess play the game and make it almost like a negative experience for some people that are on the receiving end of that. And I mean, I was unluckily I was on the receiving end of an OTK deck at a tournament, and I mean, not knowing what was going on, I kind of was blown out of the water, and I was like, oh my god, I didn't get to play at all. It kind of sucked, but but I'm glad. I mean, there are ways around that now, and FFG does put ways to make sure that the game does flow pretty well.
I have a question for you guys. Since this is probably one of the few times we're going to discuss CotA itself, and this is way like about 2 years ago. Looking back at it now, I think there's better ways for them to errata the cards. The two big erratas, which is library access and bait and switch.
Mm-hmm.
I think that first errata to me is a little too much. There's ways around it. I think they could have done a better job. I'm not saying that I know better than them. It's more just like it wasn't too like it could have been a little bit better. What do you guys think? Because I have a couple ways to try to like if I was gonna errata it myself, I have a couple ways to try to think about it. So what do you guys think?
Yeah.
You mean like a different way to errata, or
a different way to errata it? What do you guys think?
I'll let Benson or Josh speak up, and I mean I have a couple thoughts as well, but
my first thought on bait and switch was that one was probably not the most necessary, because we're looking at 3 main cards within that set that prevented the rush decks from going too high too fast. So we have Too Much to Protect, and we have Interdimensional Graft. And along with bait and switch was one of the cards that would prevent that as well. So to explain all the cards, bait and switch was you steal one, and if the opponent has more than you, you steal another one. And
you repeat it.
You keep repeating it before the errata. The errata made it so that you could only repeat it once. So you would only steal to a maximum of 2. So for any deck that could, let's say, amass over 10 pieces of amber, that would be one card, especially, and it's very situational, because if you made it so that your opponent was keeping pace with you, then that card's not really a threat. But if you have a large discrepancy of amber, then it then becomes a threat. So that card was more situational. That didn't necessarily require that errata in my mindset as well, especially at the time. Now it's like you live with what you get, so it doesn't really matter. But looking at the others, so Too Much to Protect, 1 amber pip when you play it, and you steal all but 6 of your opponent's amber. So straight up, on your turn, you gain that amber difference. And you don't take them off a key. So I guess that's why that didn't matter. And Interdimensional Graft was when your opponent forges a key, you get the leftover amber that wasn't used. So those 3, initially prior to the errata, were the main counters to any deck that rushes too high too fast. So you would have to keep an eye out on those. But having errata bait and switch, that was 1 card less. So that empowered the rush archetype within the meta to like, okay, yeah, just run up on amber. If they don't have those 2 cards, then it doesn't matter. All I need to do is just push out amber. Which again, like also quote unquote simplified the game for the first set. As for library access, like I think Dennis and I both had like this discussion of how it could have been better, in terms of how to errata it. So originally, yes, the lands deck, so library access, use Nepenthe, bring it back from the discard pile, because based off the manual, you play all your action cards into your discard pile and do the effect. So that's how you would be able to bring it back on the same turn with a Nepenthe, which is an artifact where you action, you bring back a card from your discard pile. So that's how you keep repeating that cycle, to create that OTK deck. Now, the Errata has made it so you have to purge library access after you use it. So it leaves the game, there's no way to bring it back, and especially in CotA, there was no way to bring it back. In Worlds Collide, there was that universal recycling bin that you could bring back a purged card, but again, that's very rare and difficult to pull off. Now, the alternate way is essentially what you want to do is not make it possible for somebody to do a double library access on the same turn. So the way that could be done is if it was modified, so cards that are played onto the field first, and until the effects are done with completely, and then they leave play. So for a lasting effect like that for the turn, you played it onto the field. That action card's in play. So for the rest of the turn, you draw, and there's no card that I know of that allows you to return an action card from the field to your hand. Nepenthe specifically says discard pile. So that would be another way to kill the land that OTK deck and you don't essentially gimp library access, and make a lot of decks become unusable in CotA where they relied on that draw capacity for the library access, but did not have the way to repeat it. So a lot of those decks ended up becoming a lot weaker as a result of that errata. So between those two, that's how I feel, and that's my stance on it. I don't know if Josh had something to add as well.
Yeah, I'm actually gonna be on the side of the developers here and their decision making, because the way I see it is bait and switch could be brought back by Nepenthe, for example, right? Because it just goes to your discard pile. And the impact of bait and switch, when you're thinking about the future sets as well, could be absolutely devastating, because there's no condition apart from the fact that, you know, does your opponent have more amber than you? Now that could mean something as small as having 1 or 2 more amber than you, or that could mean something as 10 or 15 more. And that could be absolutely chaotic when you're looking at Worlds Collide or Mass Mutation, when there's just so much amber on the board, right? And no way to address bait and switch in such a way that you could totally devastate the experience for someone else if there's so much amber on the board, and then you play a board wipe, and then that amber goes to the opponent, and then you just drop a bait and switch and steal literally everything. That's, in my opinion, that's a little too much of a tide turning, game changing play, because if you're ahead of the game, and you should be rewarded for being ahead of the game by being that much closer to the win con. And I think playing a card that is bait and switch minus the errata, the original bait and switch, would just ruin the experience for someone who knows he or she should be winning this game, for example, right? It takes you from the point of no return to absolute victory, which is why I think from an experience standpoint, it's good that it's errated to such a degree. In addition to that, Nepseed allowing you to recur that card multiple times in a game could just terrify people. And the reason why I think too much to protect is, like, for example, the other steel cards are totally fine, is because they have a more restricting, like, the condition in order to pull them off is a little more restricting. For example, in order to Nepenthe too much to protect, your opponent has to have, and find it useful, your opponent has to have more than 6 amber, right? And even then, you can't necessarily take them off a key, right? Um, and I think steel has its place in the game, but bait and switch is just, you're gonna see a bait and switch. If bait and switch was not errated, you would see it in every single deck, competitive tournament played, and I don't think that's the direction Keyforge is going, which is why that's been my main gripe with CotA, is that, you know, because of the nature of CotA and the nature of how certain specific houses play, what you're looking at is, when you enter a tournament, you're going to see 3 things. You're going to see a restrictive dis, a super rush untamed, or a super steel shadows. And I just prefer diversity in a game. I prefer a lot of different play styles. And I think bait and switch, I'm totally fine with the errata. It's not a big deal to me. And as far as library access, I'm glad that they turned it into library card. I like library card in mass mutation. It's basically library access, but in an artifact form, because it doesn't feel like a total waste if you just play library access from your hand and it busts, because you can at least put it on the board as library card, and you're in control of when you want to play it. So you can curate that hand, build that logos hand before finally using library card. And to me, I think that is the best version of the errata possible. Just turning it into an artifact, but still purging it.
Yeah, I mean, for me, it's in terms of errata. I don't know. I mean, I guess I stand even more with the developers than what Josh mentioned in terms of where you come from. I feel like in terms of the errata, it may have felt hard-handed at that point in time where the implementation was, but knowing what we know now as well, that developers are 3-4 sets ahead of the release schedule.
Agreed.
I would
Yeah.
think that they did take those into considerations in terms of other ways of implementation. Maybe something with that play area thing that Benson mentioned, right? But that would technically maybe even change the way people play the game, right? Introduce like another aspect or another section of the game which may have not flowed with other sets that were being in development, etc. And I mean, I know a lot of people were really unhappy with those erratas when they did come through, but I don't know. I believe I want to say that the developers, the creators of the game, have the game in mind and what's best for it, knowing that they are developing for however many sets down the road, other cards, other interactions, taking those into account, which normal players will not see, right? So I feel like maybe perhaps I would side and say what FFG did was, in their idea, was the best possible way, because I think it would be really weird for them to not consider multiple options, to have an implementation and to be pretty certain before coming out with a specific change to the game.
Yeah, that's a great
and if I
point.
could just, like what I mentioned earlier, right? Like if you look at the sets now, when there's so much ember on the board, bait and switch, you're going to see bait and switch in every competition moving forward, no matter what the set is, because of the nature of where this game is going. This game is going towards more looking at multiple avenues in how to manipulate ember, whether it's on the board, through action cards, through artifacts. And when there's too much ember on the board, if all that ember somehow happens to land on one player, that bait and switch play could be devastating for that player, right? And it could mean the difference between being two keys ahead of someone and ultimately losing the game. So I think the errata is totally fine. I think they really considered the future of the game versus the now. And I think us players initially, when we first heard of the errata, we were thinking about the now.
I agree. So listening to everybody talk now, yeah, it makes a lot of sense. One thing I didn't think about was the fact that the FFG was looking ahead into the future sets and how it would be integrated. And for sure, the thought of adding that play area situation, yes, that would alter a lot of things and make it a lot more complicated. So I definitely see those points and agree. Specifically with bait and switch, though, so I agree, but on a different point, or in a different situation rather than the one that Josh pointed out. So the one that Josh pointed out is when there's a sudden influx of amber towards the opponent and you play bait and switch to take a lot off, right? If I understood that correctly, Josh?
Yeah.
Yeah, so in that case, I feel like it's the same, or like Too Much to Protect and Interdimensional Graft would have played a similar role in that circumstance. So for bait and switch in that circumstance, yes, it would just be a third card that does the same thing. I don't think erratating it would have an impact on that situation. The situation that's probably more hard hitting in my opinion is that situation where you're at 8 amber, or let's say up to 10 amber, that's the range where bait and switch can hit the hardest. Reason being is if you just forged, used up their amber and timed it right and used bait and switch when your opponent was hitting 10, you could steal 5 of it. So one card takes them below the cost to forge a key, whereas the other cards would still like let them forge, assuming you have no other way of taking them down further, right? But in terms of the sheer capacity of the deck, of the card, bait and switch should not be able to hit harder in the situation described where there's a huge influx of amber as a TMTP with a follow-up card to take them off. That's just my 2 cents on that specific situation. But yeah, like otherwise I do agree at the end of the day, the developers did the right thing, and in the long run it's going to be a positive impact on the game, not a negative one. It's just I was sharing that initial reaction at the time of like within the CotA meta, with only knowing what we knew and being an inexperienced player or without the understanding of how these game developments work. The initial reaction was, but why? But yeah, like everything everybody said is absolutely right, and I agree.
Okay, so while everybody gave their opinion and their thoughts on it, just want to say that I guess I'm thinking about this from a competitive standpoint. So we're in 4 sets now, right? So CotA, if we're gonna go to like a big tournament, like let's say primes, I think CotA's gonna be pushed out. It's gonna be the latest 3 sets. So that CotA mechanics will totally be gone. Number 2, if on the developer side of things, I understand that they are thinking of the game's future and how the future interactions will come into play. On that note, though, if the errata for library access was in the middle of AOA, which the mechanic of alpha was already in the game. In my opinion, the errata they could have put library access as an alpha card. So even if it's on the discard pile, you cannot bring it back for another turn. So even if the Pensive is on the board, you can't bring it back because it's an alpha card. You can't play it twice. Number 2, in bait and switch, where I literally figured this out is because you can bait and switch. If you're 1-to-1 key, your opponent you want to take your opponent off the board, go to 7, go to 8, bait out that bait and switch and run up to on amber. So like if you see the card in the Archon format, the question is how do you play around it? It's a similar mindset if you're looking at too much to protect or too much to protect. How do you play around it? So that's why I have a gripe on the erratas. It's just like if the erratas wasn't there, it forces you to think about it. And like I said, the Penseed, the Lance deck, why they errated that is because that deck won a Vault Tour. And it was broadcasted to everybody, and everybody saw it. That as like, oh, this deck needs to be errated. Like this card needs to be errated. I think that was the reason why Lance decks got errated, and that deck literally, it's still strong, but it's not as strong as before. So like the way I'm thinking about it is you can play around those big steals, and you can implement the fact that things can be alpha, so you don't have to use it multiple times. And I do agree that the library card aspect of things is it's a good errata, but you can totally change how the card plays too, right? Make it an artifact. That's in future sets though, but that's besides the point. So like the way I'm seeing it is they're thinking about in the future, you can implement, I guess, a little bit future mechanics into the errata. So that's how I would have errated the cards.
I mean, playing that alpha thing, I think, is a good idea. If memory serves me, it was within the second set. But then I believe then it would introduce just from a game set idea, right? You would be introducing just one keyword in the whole set, and then so if someone picks up, call the Archon thing and they see an alpha, then they have to explain what alpha is for this one card for the full set. I mean, there are multiple ways to do it, but that just seems like it'll be really confusing for someone who's just focusing on CotA or something, right?
For sure.
Yeah.
For
So,
sure.
but I mean, at the end of the day, what we have is the errata that we have now, and of course, FFG has pushed out other erratas for other cards. But actually, speaking of erratas, I don't think there's any set that has more erratas in it than like so. Errata is like a permanent change to a card in play than the first set. I mean, there were a couple other ones. One or two cards for clarification purposes or a minor change, but I think CotA was only set with even like 3 cards that got permanently changed.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah.
What was the third?
So it was library access, bait and switch. Was there a third one? I don't know.
Remember.
Well, I mean, listeners, if there is a third one from the first set, feel free to let us know. And we can definitely carry this conversation a lot further into the future in regards to permanent changes into Keyforge. But as we are nearing our 1 hour mark for this episode, I just, we've had a lot of discussions with CotA, huge discussion about errata and stuff. But from the first set, I did ask the guys previously to come with their favorite card, and maybe a brief description of why it's your favorite card out of the first set of CotA. Anybody want to go first, just to share what your favorite card is? No.
Favorite card from the first set?
Yeah.
Mimicry.
Hey. Okay.
Ooh. Okay.
All right. I like that.
Yeah. It's in the house that I love, and it also stands the test of time since action cards aren't going anywhere, and there's always going to be a function for it that your opponent's deck provides for you, and also all the great memories I had with that card. So, yeah.
Yeah. Mimicry is a fun card. Very future proof as well. Yep.
Yep.
Josh, you got one from the first set?
It's tough, man. Not yet. You'll probably want to edit this out. Go ahead, you guys first.
For me, it's gonna be. It used to be bait and switch. It really used to be, but now it's too much to protect. Just because, in my head, if I'm holding that card or if the opponent's holding that card, it's either threatening or I'm not threatened. So it's like another layer of, I guess, thinking or like just in your head. It's like, do you have it or you don't? So it's threatening.
Cool. Man, I'm split between a few cards, but it's either going to be Massis Asp or Mind Warper. A for Massis Asp because I love calling it a different thing that sounds really familiar, which I probably shouldn't be saying. And it is literally a big pain in the butt when it does come out. Generally,
it is a massive pain in the butt.
Yes. So the Massis Asp, it is currently still in circulation in sets. It's a 3-power creature with poison. And it's just a giant snake. I just love it, and it's poison and skirmish, so it can basically bite anybody and die and kill it and not die and continue its reign of terror on the board. Even though with CotA, a lot of people say that you don't need a board, but when you do have a board, it can take care of things pretty handedly. And then, of course, second one is Mind Warper, just because from Mars, it's a 2-powered elusive creature that has an action where it says the opponent's creature captures 1 amber from the opponent, which is amazing. I just love it because it's so annoying when it comes down. And the artwork itself is, I don't know, it's pretty cool. It's aliens, it's green, it has this like just super annoying when it comes down. People feel like they need to get rid of it. And Mind Warper has helped me in so many ways. I have a deck with 2 of them, which is just give me you take your own Amber, makes the opponent. So it's one of those like memes where you see people was like, "Why are you slapping yourself? Why are you hitting yourself?" Right? It's just making the opponent kind of like mess with themselves, and then you just kind of
Great.
laugh at the same time.
All right, so I got one.
Yeah, let's
Actually,
hear it.
I actually have 2. So one is within the set, and one is across all sets. So the first one is actually, funny enough, it's Speed Sigil. And that card is within the set of Call of the Archons. I love Speed Sigil. It speeds up the entire deck. Sure, it'll speed up your opponent as well to a certain degree, but that's something you can work around fairly easily, right? You can choose when to drop it. You can wait for specific creatures that your opponent drops before playing it, for example. But I love the combination that Speed Sigil can have with all the other cards, creatures in your CotA deck. And just for people who don't know, Speed Sigil is an artifact. It provides an amber bonus, and it says the first creature played each turn enters play ready. So a readied Fagin is a threat. Readied
Big pain.
Bullet Eye is a threat. A readied Mac the Knife is a threat. I'm just naming out Shadows cards. But they're all threats, and it's great. Even a Zookeeper that is readied, which allows you to literally deny your opponent of their creatures by archiving it, is a threat.
Yeah, I mean, it's a great card because when it comes down, it changes the way people play.
So
yes.
In my head, whenever that card's out, any reap effect, any action, any fight effect becomes a play effect. So you can use it right away. So forget all the reap effect, action effect, fight effect. You play it, you play a card, it becomes a play effect. So you get an extra bonus use out of it right away.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, and the other card is Mac the Knife.
That's a 3-powered creature.
Yeah, 3-power creature, has elusive, and I believe it has an action. When you action out Mac the Knife, you can either
You can deal
one.
Is that the one?
No, Mac the Knife is you can use it as if it's part of the active house and deal one damage. If it kills it, you gain an amber.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, yeah. So Mac the Knife, 3-power elusive creature. You may use Mac the Knife as if it belonged to the active house. Action, deal 1 damage to a creature. This damage destroys that creature, gain 1. Even within the set, Mac the Knife is disgusting because it doesn't matter what house you call, you're essentially having an extra creature to play, an extra creature that can generate Ember, and there's so much you can do. Mac the Knife is my favorite card in my favorite deck of the 3rd set, Worlds Collide, and that's because of the blasters. So you can literally use Mac the Knife as a conduit, as a holder of your blasters until you get the right creatures down. And I've done some pretty nasty things with Mac the Knife, Frane's Blaster, and Officer Frane. So, boom.
Yeah.
And once again, that's another topic, Josh.
Hey man, Call of the Archons cards. I'm just looking ahead here.
Fair enough.
It plays into his preferred style of play as well with the house cheating. So
exactly.
Great
he's just cheating. He's cheating through the discussion as well. He's
set cheating now.
Hey guys, just wait till we get to the later sets, man. I'm gonna go off.
Awesome.
Okay, well, since everybody had multiple, I'm gonna add in like 1 or 2 more. Control the Weak, because I have a love-hate relationship with that card. Some of you remember that one game. I literally got Control the Weak 3 times in a row and lost the game when I was ahead 2 keys to none. Yeah, that happened. And on Josh's note of house cheating, I should have pulled this up earlier, but the upgrade in Sanctum that turns your creature into essentially a universal creature. So
Mantle of the Zealot?
Mantle of the Zealot, yes. Because it's way better than the experimental therapy card in Logos, where you have to stun it. You can use it right away, and it played in really well into a deck that I owned. So yeah, 3 cards.
Alrighty. Well, once again, I mean, it's been great to speak with all you guys again and touch base once more. But it's past our 1 hour mark, and to spare our listeners from our continuous bantering, I mean, maybe we'll spin it off and continue on our CotA discussion next week, or maybe we'll move on to actually talk about Josh's set, Age of Ascension.
And there's
We'll see.
lots to talk about, boys and girls.
Yeah,
And
we'll
ladies
see.
and
We'll see where we'll be next week,
People of all
and
ages.
hopefully our episode this week has given some thought into Keyforge. Hopefully sparks a little bit more discussion amongst the community in regards to Call of the Archons, and maybe even some discussion about whether or not people think the Errata is a good thing or not. Or maybe they should change it back. We are Team ESP, and of course, you can reach out to us at our email at extrashards@gmail.com, extrashards@gmail.com. We welcome any and all comments, critiques, how to maybe put out better content for everyone in the Keyforge community. And once again, we thank you for listening to us. And until next week, this has been John, the Untamer Benson, the High Templar Archon Trader Dennis, and the deck opener Josh. Each of you guys want to plug your connections on social media and YouTube and stuff? Dennis?
Twitch.tv/DCTrace. Gonna open more decks.
Cool. Josh?
Hello. Yes. I'm just kidding. JoDoBikF, JoDoBikF. Woo-woo.
And Benson?
And my tag is Chaos Chrono, ChaosChrno. Yeah, it's missing one O. You can find me on YouTube and on Twitch.
All right, and this is John. Thank you once again for listening to the Keys to ESP. We'll see you later. Happy forging, everybody.
Bye.